Abigail, a dating coach on her way to being a published author, is walking proudly down the street on a sunny day just before Christmas. There are children playing in the streets, and Santa is ringing a bell, lending a festive and merry mood to the atmosphere. Abigail enters a coffee shop and takes off her coat, smiling broadly. She's excited that she's about to fulfill her dream of getting her new dating guide in print and help people's dreams come true. She meets one of her clients, Jim, in the queue for coffee. She peps him up, telling him that he's got this, as he looks nervously over at a woman at the far side of the shop. She's oblivious to the pair, petting her dog under the table. Jim seems to want to introduce himself but has no idea what he's going to say. Abigail tells him to trust her, then orders a sandwich and slips some bacon into his coat pocket, then sends him over to the woman's table. As soon as he gets near the woman's table, the dog runs over to him and starts jumping up at his coat to try and get the bacon. She rushes up, embarrassed that her dog is bothering him, and they strike up a conversation. Although Jim is still clearly nervous, the woman invites him to sit down for a coffee as an apology. Jim catches Abigail's eye, and she nods at him from the counter. She's smiling widely as she leaves the shop with her coffee, happy that she's helped one of her clients finally take the first step. She exits the shop and does a little dance of satisfaction outside on the street. A man on a motorbike, Michael, pulls up and parks beside her, but she doesn't notice him at first, too excited about what's just happened. He approaches her with a smile and she stops dancing, embarrassed to have been caught, and greets him before walking off quickly. He watches her go, curious, and his gaze is still fixed on her when his friend, Brad, turns up and asks him if he's okay. The two of them enter the coffee shop. Brad jokes about Michael's lack of success with women as they sit down, and then the conversation turns serious. Michael gets a text from his dad, and Brad asks him how long he has to decide, and he replies that he's got 12 days, until the last business day of the year. It transpires that his dad interfered in a huge business deal he set up, and he's angry about it. Brad asks him to join him at a bar that night, and he agrees. Just at that moment, Jim and his date laugh loudly enough for the whole shop to hear. James, Abigail's roommate, is at home when she arrives back, making a smoothie. She brags jokingly to him that this afternoon she's going to get her book deal done and she'll probably be moving out to some fancy new apartment. He's excited for her, knowing it's a lifelong dream, but refuses to wish her luck, saying she doesn't need it because she's already got this. Abigail arrives at the publisher's house, C. McNay Publishing, and meets the receptionist, Sarah, who says she's a big fan of the manuscript and it really gave her what she needed so she won't have to be alone for the holidays again. Abigail is taken aback that she's read it, but grateful that someone seems to be so invested in her success. Sarah lets her in to see Jack, the boss, who welcomes her in with a smile. He tells her the secret to his success is that he married the smartest woman in the world, who's the key to everything he's built, and shows her a photo of his wife. He explains that although he knows good writing, he didn't really understand her manuscript, but Sarah loved it and she is excellent at knowing the latest trends. He does have some reservations, though, about the rules in the guide, because it's so different from how he met his wife 45 years ago. Abigail tells him that technology and social media have changed the game completely, and while his high school sweetheart story is enviable, in the dating world, things are very different now. Jack rebuts her, though, saying firmly that love is about an authentic connection, and everyone arrives at it differently, sometimes less is more. Abigail tells him that she's got a 90% success rate with her clients by using the advice in that book, trying hard to persuade him to publish her. She offers to prove it by following her own advice, leading by example, and says she will bring a date to the publishing firm's Christmas party in 12 days' time. Jack is incredulous, thinking it's impossible for someone to meet and make a stranger fall in love with them in that short a time. But he agrees to publish her if she succeeds, thinking of his wife's philosophy of trying to see things from another perspective. The publicity from the author following her own example might make the book a hit. Abigail is extremely excited. She shakes his hand, ready to set out on her quest to find her perfect match before the party. She returns home to James, who is wrapping presents. She explains what happened at the publishing house, and James is skeptical. He asks if she's still immune to love. She professes that while she likes a good movie, right now, her book is her priority, and she needs to do this for the sake of getting it published. She can't pay anyone or cheat, she has to do it for real, with someone she's never met before, and he has to actually fall in love with her. James asks her what her advice actually is, and she's exasperated that he hasn't even read her book yet, throwing a copy at him and explaining her 12 rules of dating. James agrees with all of them. Later that night, in a bar, Abigail goes to the bar to get drinks, and Michael and Brad are playing pool nearby. Michael notices her and recognizes her as the girl who was doing the happy dance that morning. He smiles, a small laugh playing around his lips as he remembers it fondly. Brad follows his gaze and agrees that she's gorgeous. He has to take a call from his girlfriend, so Michael heads over to the restroom. Meanwhile, Abigail is sitting with James, who is pointing out potential suitors for her. She heads up to the bar, having scoped out a guy she likes, but he's discussing with his friend about how he feels bad for cheating on his girlfriend. She interrupts their conversation and gives him dating advice, handing over her business card and introducing herself as a dating coach. She bumps into Michael on the way back from the bar, spilling drinks down his shirt, and apologizes profusely, grabbing napkins and trying to clean it up. James watches on with glee. Michael smiles, not bothered at all by the spillage, and tells her it's nice to see her again. She recognizes him as the man on the motorbike and is completely mortified, even more so when he says her dance is cute and mimics it. He wants to apologize for embarrassing her by buying her a drink, and she agrees, but she says she'll pay because she bumped into him. They try and fail to get the attention of the bartender, so Michael leans over the bar and takes 2 beers, leaving money on the counter. Meanwhile, both James and Brad are hovering in the background of the conversation, indicating what their respective friends should say, in an incredibly distracting manner. Abigail suggests they play some pool, mainly to get away from seeing James miming at her. Michael tries Brad's tactic of telling women interesting facts to get them to like him while they play pool. It's working, but Abigail is a much better pool player and is absolutely destroying him at the game. He laughs although he's been soundly defeated, and she walks away, thanking him for the game and leaving him her number on a napkin. He watches her as she leaves, thoroughly enthralled. The next morning, James is up reading Abigail's book and is completely engrossed in it. He compliments her attitude the previous night, saying he's never seen her so confident. But she's concerned because she skipped chapter 1 of the book and went straight to chapter 2, improvise, after she bumped into Michael. She likes following rules and wants to do things exactly by the book. At that moment, she receives a message from Michael asking if she's free that night, and initially, she panics because she's breaking another rule, not seeing someone 2 days in a row. However, there are exceptions to the rule, so she replies saying she wants to do something fun, which counts as a playful date, not a romantic one, and therefore it's allowed. When he says yes, she does her happy dance again, and James watches her with a knowing smile. Abigail meets Michael later on at the date, and he's just had a call from his dad. He explains that they have a bit of a complex relationship. She admires his car, and they engage in some banter before going inside. There's an obvious spark between them. Her dad was a mechanic, and she knows a lot about old cars because of him. They head inside, and it turns out the date is axe throwing. Michael admits it's his first time, and it turns out he's not great at it. Abigail steps up and shows him how to do it, but he's still useless, and he suggests somewhere a bit less adventurous. Abigail agrees and he drives her over to his garage, which is full of old classic cars. He refurbishes them for a living. Abigail talks about how much her dad would love this place, but he's out in California now, so she doesn't see him as much. Michael offers to let her borrow one the next time he's in town. It's clear by now that the two of them have a real connection. He shows her his favorite car, one that is special to him because it was his mother's favorite too. He explains that he came back to town to help his father run the business, but they had a disagreement over its future after his mom passed away, and he doesn't work there anymore. He laughs and says he's talking way too much for a first date, but Abigail doesn't mind. He asks what she does for a living, and unwilling to explain that she's a dating coach, she dodges the question. She tells him she's a writer, but it's a work in progress. At that point, enjoying herself, but worried she's going to give away her secret, she makes her excuses and leaves quickly. Michael says he wants to see her again, and they hug before she heads off. There's a moment where he's looking into her eyes, and it looks like they're about to share their first kiss, but Abigail pulls herself away. Later, she's talking to James, worried that she's breaking too many rules. Michael's asking to see her one day after the next. He's opening himself to being vulnerable with her, and he was about to kiss her on the second date. None of that complies with the 12 rules. But nevertheless, she really likes him, and she's trying to figure out what to do. James urges her to keep seeing him, exasperated with her for being so obsessed with the rules. Abigail decides to go to chapter 5, showing off her skills, and is going to invite Michael over for food. The next day, Abigail meets Sarah at the coffee shop. She explains that there's a boy she likes who delivers mail to the office. Abigail gives her advice on how to approach him, and Sarah is so grateful. She says she wishes she could be as bold and honest as Abigail is. Abigail, though, feels guilty because she's not been honest with Michael about her profession, or the reason why she's looking for a relationship. The words affect her. She heads over to the classic car garage later that day, nervous and cross with herself for doing something so off-book, but knowing that she needs to ramp up if she's going to meet the deadline of the party. Michael accepts her invitation for dinner and invites her in to see the car he's working on, his mom's favorite. He explains how he's planning on improving it, but Abigail disagrees, saying he should keep it authentic. He grins, and they share a lingering gaze, but afraid of getting too close, she pulls away again. That night, he comes over for dinner and brings her a toy car to add to the collection her father gave her. She says she's making tacos, and he remembers how his mom used to make him tacos for his birthday every year. He mixes up the meat and beans, against her usual recipe, but promises her it'll blow her mind. He challenges her to break the rules, not to follow the process, and just go with what she feels in the moment. Nervous but excited, she agrees and is impressed with how nice the taco tastes. Michael wipes sour cream off her chin, and she retaliates by spreading some on his nose. They laugh together, and Michael takes a photo. Later, they're sitting on the couch together, drinking wine. It's extremely romantic. Abigail tells him she's always loved the idea of love, but after a few failed attempts, she gave up and threw herself into work instead. She likes structure and predictability, and she can't control love in the way she likes. Michael says that sometimes you can't approach things expecting that kind of structure because that's not how love works. He says he's still single because he never really felt the same spark that his parents had, and he's always envied it. He looks at Abigail as he says it, and it's clear the spark is there between them. Abigail suggests a walk, and they head out in the snow, sharing childhood memories with each other. She says she doesn't want to live with any regrets, so perhaps that's why she's not found love yet. She's so focused on finding something with the highest probability of success. They come across a fountain that she has always thought about jumping into, and Michael persuades her to do it, saying she'll regret it if she doesn't take the chance. They take their shoes off and step in the fountain. Laughing, Michael grabs her around the waist and picks her up. She holds onto him, their noses touching, and they're about to kiss when a security guard asks what they're doing in the fountain. They grab their shoes and run away together, giggling. The next day, Abigail is cooking breakfast in a great mood. James asks her what's up, and she says it went perfectly, but she's starting to feel guilty. She only started this to publish her book, and now, she's actually catching real feelings for Michael. Just then, her phone rings with the invitation to the publishing house holiday party, and she instantly feels full of regret. She doesn't want to be the kind of person who just uses someone else to get ahead, and she didn't think about the consequences of what might happen when she accepted this challenge. James tries to make her feel better using her own words from the book, but she claims the rules are just coming back to haunt, rather than comfort her. She lies in bed that night, unable to sleep, feeling worse and worse about the way she's treated Michael. She grabs her phone, messaging him before she can change her mind, and he instantly calls her. She asks him if he'll come to a Christmas Eve party with her, and he agrees. He says he has to do something with his dad that night, but he'll split his time. He invites her to dinner with Brad and his family the next day. After they hang up, both spend a minute just thinking about the other, with a love-struck smile. Sarah and Abigail meet in the coffee shop, and she tells him things went really well with the delivery boy, but she said no to having dinner with him because of Abigail's rule. Abigail, thinking about her latest interactions with Michael, tells her it's okay to break the rules occasionally. Sarah's confused, but she follows Abigail's advice and texts Sam. He replies, and they're back on for dinner. Abigail tells her just to go with the flow and see what happens. Sarah doesn't understand because she's not following the rules in the book. Abigail tells Sarah, and is beginning to realize herself, that rules aren't always perfect. Sometimes, it's best to just let things happen. That night, they're at Brad's house with his wife Lydia and his son. Abigail arrives dressed beautifully, and finds Michael in an ugly Christmas onesie, which is a holiday tradition. Brad and his family are wearing matching ones. Abigail is embarrassed that she missed the text telling her what to wear, but Lydia gives her a spare. Michael takes her hand and spins her around, telling her she's the perfect combination of beautiful and adorable. They dance in the living room for a moment, foreheads touching, totally caught up in each other. At dinner, Lydia asks Abigail what she does, and she says she's sort of like a life coach and is hoping to be published soon. Brad starts to say something about Michael, but Michael interrupts him, cutting him off and saying she's already seen the car garage and knows what he does. After, the two of them read a book to Brad's son, Cole, and tuck him in for the night. Michael drives her home and walks her to the door of her apartment. They stop outside Abigail's door, and she's wrestling with her overwhelming feelings of guilt. She knows, at this point, that she's falling in love with Michael for real, but she can't bring herself to tell him the truth and break the bubble. He says he wasn't planning for any of this to happen, and they hug for just a moment longer than normal. Then they draw back and share a long look, spellbound, and Michael leans in to kiss her. But Abigail bites her lip, afraid that if she kisses him, it'll all become real, and she'll have to admit to him what she's done. He's confused, but then says he's forgotten something. He goes to the car and brings her a framed copy of the photo he took of them from the taco night. He says that the process may be messy, but the result is what matters. Overwhelmed, Abigail takes it and wishes him goodnight. Michael calls his dad and leaves a voicemail, saying he's still thinking about the decision, and that he'll see him on Christmas Eve. In bed, Abigail is reading her own book and realizing that a lot of what she's written might not be true. She's doubting her own rules, she's falling in love, and everything she thought she knew has gone out the window. The next day, she tells James she can't do it anymore. Everything she's worked for is just a fraud. She's broken every rule while falling in love with Michael. James comforts her, telling her that she's a great dating coach and her work speaks for itself. Even if this situation is different, so many happy couples exist because of her. "This is just a bit messy." The words he uses make Abigail recall Michael's photo, and she has a bolt of realization, the perfect idea to fix her relationship and still get the book deal. She says she's going to go to the party and come clean to Michael. She begins rewriting sections of her manuscript, changing some of the chapters, remembering the things that have happened to her and Michael, how they've broken every rule during all the sweet moments they've shared. She writes about how they fell in love in the messiest way. Finally, she's done, and sits back with a smile of satisfaction, sure that her new manuscript is going to be exactly what Jack is looking for. Meanwhile, Michael is in the car garage. He pulls out an old letter from his mother to his father, which thanks him for creating the publishing company for her. She wants to keep it small, get people's stories told, and make a difference. It turns out that Michael is Jack's son, and the company that he came back to town to help run was McNay Publishing. He looks at the letter, nodding, and seems to come to a decision. The night of the party, he arrives to pick Abigail up in the classic car that his mother loved. Now that it's all finished, he's going to give it to his dad as a Christmas present. He tells her that he decided to follow her advice and keep the engine the way it was. When they get in the car, Abigail tries to come clean to him. But he says since this is the car's maiden voyage, he wants to savor it, and she doesn't get the opportunity before they arrive. When they get there, Michael realizes that Abigail's Christmas Eve party is the same one his father is hosting, but he doesn't say anything to her. Abigail says that she needs to talk to Michael, and he says he has something to tell her too, but goes off to fetch drinks first. While he's at the bar, Abigail finds Jack and says she has something she wants to discuss with him about their deal. Michael sees Abigail talking to his father, but before he goes over, Sarah interrupts him and says she's missed him. Michael asks her if she knows who Abigail is, and Sarah explains all about Abigail's dating book and how she's been coaching her with her boyfriend Sam, who's at the party. Jack asks Abigail to introduce him to her date, and then catches sight of Michael at the bar and takes her over to him. Oblivious to what's happening, he explains the whole truth, that Abigail wrote a dating book, and she was going to make a stranger fall in love with her by using the advice she'd written. Michael, devastated that the whole thing has been a sham, has to hold back tears and makes a swift exit. Abigail hands Jack the new copy of her manuscript, saying that she fell in love with his son, and it changed everything she ever thought she knew. Later, James holds Abigail while she sobs uncontrollably. A few days later, Jack meets Michael in the coffee shop. He says he wants to tell him a few things before he hears about the decision, and thanks him for the car, saying he absolutely loves it. Next, he apologizes for messing up Michael's big deal, explaining that he was just too scared that he might lose sight of why they founded the company in the first place. Michael agrees and says in the end, it was the right thing to kill the deal. He was the one who lost sight of what it was all about. He says, though, that he's not going to come back to the company. Jack says he respects the decision, but that he wants Michael to read the book Abigail wrote. He gets a little choked up and says there's always a place for him at the company if he wants it, and begs him to come to the office and read the new version, because it's about him. Sighing, Michael takes the manuscript and leaves the coffee shop with his father. James, meanwhile, has overheard the whole thing while waiting for his pickup order. He takes it back to Abigail, who's on the couch, upset that Michael still won't return her calls, and tells her that Michael's at the publishing house right now. He asks her if she's going to follow her own advice one more time and take a chance. Abigail immediately sits up, knowing what she has to do. She can't sit and lose herself in the problem, but instead, she should find a solution. She texts Sarah, who meets her at the building. She lets her in and tells her to be bold. Jack waves Abigail into his office, and she goes on a tirade, saying that Michael's the most amazing man she's ever met, and she wants to apologize to Jack personally for wasting his time with the book. She hopes he'll pass a message to Michael about how sorry Abigail is for what she did to him. Jack explains that he went through the new version of the book, and he finally gets it now. Michael enters the room, reading the dedication out loud, which reveals that Abigail fell in love with him for real. Jack excuses himself, and Abigail apologizes to Michael. She never expected to find him. She tells him that in his case, for the first time ever, the rules don't apply. He is ready to forgive her after reading her book. He understands that things started out as a career move, but he now genuinely believes that everything they had was real. He tells her he'll be coming back to the publishing house full-time, because he wants to publish her book for her. She's overjoyed and doesn't know what to say, as Michael takes her in his arms and kisses her. Abigail learns that although rules are important, sometimes the best thing to do is just to follow your heart.